stand up and ask for your rights. Say, well, if we live in a society of equal opportunity, this is what the liberal dogma teaches us, then I certainly want to have an opportunity to send my kids to good school and not suffer from this reverse discrimination. You never hear about these things. You didn't hear that 40,000 people, 40,000 women were raped in the United States of America last year. I think this is the right number, more or less. Don't quote me on that, I'm not quite certain. And mostly those culprits were who? Were people of non-European origin, were blacks in most cases. You don't hear, for instance, that out of 2.5 million prisoners in the United States of America, and this is the only prospering industry, 2.5 million. And each prisoner costs the taxpayers about $40,000 per month. I guess it's a little bit more by now. Now, out of those 2.5 million prisoners, about 75% are non-European Americans. So either they are Mexican Americans or black Americans. So even if I was a guy not necessarily decorated with PhDs and different linguistic skills, even if I was a guy, as they say in America, even if I was a hick or a hillbilly living in as a peasant guy, I need to know, why is this? Why did it drop from the moon? Why is this number so high as far as the black inmates are concerned, or Hispanic inmates? Or why, for instance, in Oslo, downtown, I'm quite certain, in this little prison where they have, that at least, I'm just taking a wild guess, you probably know better than me, those who are in security, at least 25% of just petty criminals in this country are foreigners, are not Norwegians, at least. In Belgium it's 45%, 50%. I'm not just talking about petty criminals, I'm talking about big criminals as well. I don't want to put names, because this is where we often make a mistake. Just because, you know, the prostitution rings run by the Albanian mafia in Brussels, it doesn't mean that there are not some good Albanians. You see what I mean? There are some very good Albanians that I also know of. So, but unfortunately this causes, it actually makes us think that most of the Albanians are like that. This is a very heavy issue, I understand the fact. People don't like being stereotyped, but the fact of the matter is, and you just open up the newspapers, or go and search on the Google, and you will find out that in the European Union, I'm just giving you an example, most of those petty criminals and even those big criminals, well, percentage-wise, are of non-European origin, or for that matter, even of non-European, not even European citizens. The same thing we have, of course, in the United States of America. I guess people talk about crimes, and you would be surprised that even folks who carry a weapon in America, you have National Rifle Association, and you always assume where there are weapons that people kill each other. You'd be surprised that basically people who do have weapons, white people, very seldom use those weapons. But mostly those crimes occur in those quote-unquote black areas, or for that matter Mexican areas, where they have different gangs. So even cops will tell you, and I know some cops, well, Tom, we can't do very much about this because these are federal laws. So, you know, as you know very well, if the trouble started today or tomorrow, if we had a big meeting here, and if we behaved politely like angels, like Angel Gabriels, if you wish, if we were all decent, if somebody causes some problems, some leftist heckler or some guy, those who would pay the price first would not be them, but us. And unfortunately, this is something we don't want to put up with. We have to realize that, but it should not prevent you from raising those questions. And, for that matter, you can, just very modestly, you can read some of my books that deal with those issues of violent crime and minorities, what's their percentage, and so on and so forth. Having said that, this brings us to the issue of our identity, who we are. And I already spoke about this topic once, but now I'm going to talk about this topic from a somewhat different perspective. So I don't like repeating myself, because I did prepare very well my speech, but I will make it more loosely. I will not make it very uptight and very formal. Look, of course, you know, we are at loss with our identity. I am also at loss in Croatia, despite the fact that Croatia, which has the same number of inhabitants like Norway, approximately 4.5 million people, despite the fact that Croatia is highly racially homogeneous, about 95%, I mean, it's still being used for reasons that you're familiar with. So let's use a fancy word which means nothing: multicultural. I keep saying I'm a very multicultural person because I'm proud. I can speak a couple languages and I admire foreign cultures, but I'm certainly not a multiracial person. So this is again a trick that you have to decipher before you start dealing with the problem. When you read your press, when you read the American press, the German press, read first how the word sentences are being put together and what type of a lingo, what type of a language is being used by, not just by opponents, but by the well-paid journalists. So, of course there is a problem here, because at some point you start asking yourself the question, what does Norway mean for me? Where is my identity? Do I have to look for my identity in a hidden, furtive fashion? Because if I say it aloud that I'm proud of being a Norwegian, somebody can tell me, you're that bad, that racist fellow, okay? Or if I'm proud of being a German, ich bin stolz, Deutsch zu sein, it sounds so good, so powerful, so poignant, people freak out, you know, they don't want to say it aloud, you know? I can say, ironically, in Croatia, I'm proud of being, ja sam ponosan što sam Hrvat, because it's still normal, you know? So we have more freedom now than in Germany, in terms of those expressions. People go to soccer stadiums and they do crazy things, you know, probably here they would go to prison. So anyway, basically, this is the first point I wanted to tell you when we talk about identity. I'm trying to portray myself, after all, I'm an American citizen as well. And one of the reasons, you know, I left the United States of America because I started thinking after a while, well, what does this country look like? You know? Do I have to change my name? And I mentioned that I had students, you know, a lady of German descent, she was thinking about changing her name into Gonzalez because it would sound more as, you know, more politically correct to get hired into this quota and to get the grant, to get the scholarship and so on. So as you can see, I'm just, so to speak, spewing things at you, but you may want to consider those issues. First, I guess we solved one thing. Self-censorship, try to avoid it in a decent fashion. Try to show a little bit more courage. Tell your friends nothing to be afraid of. Make sure that even a person who you invite, that is a normal guy, that he has a clean record, so to say, that he's not into drugs or whatever. And certainly make sure always that you stick with the parameters of the law. We have to play this game. But at the same time, I guess we also solve this, make sure that you raise those questions. Back to the Norwegian identity, which, for that matter, I'm just using as a microcosm in Norway. It could be just as well any other country in Western Europe. Of course, the first thing that crosses your mind is all those bloody, you know, foreigners. They're ruining me. They're bad people. Wrong. They're not bad people. We have to know exactly. This is where most of even my good colleagues, even from America, and I will now dwell on it for half an hour, 15 minutes at least. You have to first and foremost in political science, I'm talking to you now as a political scientist and not as a demagogue. I have no pretensions to be even a president. I'm just a writer and keep giving speeches and I'm proud of it. You have to know the first thing in political science, you have to make a distinction between foe and friend. Who is your foe and who is your friend? Just like you do with your mate. You want to make sure you discriminate, so to speak. Life is by definition